Welcome to Lighthouse Church. We are on our daily devotions again, and here we are Tuesday morning. We are going to be in John 13 today as we cover one of the most well-known stories in Christ's life. This is one that we know so well that quite often we miss the significance of it, and we miss just how deep and grave a situation the disciples were in and Christ was in at this moment. And quite often we simply turn it into another ordinance or something of that nature rather than absorbing the true lessons of this passage. There's a story from the Revolutionary War that an officer was trying to get his men to finish building a wall. And as they were working on it, they were lifting very heavy logs and trying to get them into place. And the young officer was berating his men and yelling at them and frustrated with the lack of progress and with the lack of strength getting this log into place. And you can imagine these men were tired, they were weary, it was cold. They were in Valley Forge at the time, which was a cold, bitter time, and most of the men hadn't eaten even well enough. And they just simply lacked the strength. And as he was yelling at his men and frustrated with them as they were trying to lift this last log into place, a very tall and somewhat imposing figure strode up to the situation and stepped right in, put his shoulder to the log and lifted with the rest of the men, and with his strength and his help, they lifted it into place. As they got this log into place, the officer, looking at the newcomer, very frustrated, began to dress him down as well. He was frustrated that this man had interfered and not forced his men to do what he wanted them to do. But as he began to speak, his words caught in his throat as the man turned, and he looked full in the face of General George Washington. The master is no better than the servant in that case. It is an excellent example of the highest being humble enough to help the lowest. Now, in this case, we are dealing with a picture, an example, which is what Jesus taught by so often, because a story, a picture, is worth 1,000 words, yes? Jesus was giving, in this situation, the ultimate example, not only of servant leadership, but of his relationship with us. One of the first things I saw when I walked onto the seminary grounds at Dallas Theological Seminary was a statue of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. So let us look at chapter 13 here, and let us look at it from the point of view of the people of the time. 1, if you were a Jewish person and you went to a dinner, you would bathe before that dinner, making yourself clean and presentable. Then you would put on your finest clothes to go be with this host or this friend of yours, and you would walk down the street. Now, the streets of the time were interesting. They were made of dirt, and Roman soldiers traveled them. Jews traveled them. Roman horses traveled them. There would be times that you might find yourself inadvertently stepping into something that came out of the south end of a northbound Roman horse, or a donkey, or any other number of animals that had traversed the area. You would find yourself being dusty and dirty and sometimes rather foul at the feet by the time you reached your destination. Oftentimes, at the door or just in the entrance of the house, the lowest slave of the house, or the lowest servant, would be there to wash your feet. As Mike Rowe said in Dirty Jobs, if you've ever watched that show, there are people that do these amazingly filthy things so that, as he said, civilized life is possible for the rest of us. In this place and time, no self-respecting Roman or Jewish religious leader or anyone of any consequence would wash feet. That was the job for the low people. Now, as we get into this passage, understanding that, also understanding where these disciples are at. Their minds are in a whirl of confusion. There is fear. They're not sure what the religious leaders are planning. They just know that they're after Jesus. They're not sure what Jesus is going to do. He's been talking about dying. There are all sorts of strange things going on. And in the middle of this confusion, we sit down to dinner. Verse 1 of chapter 13 records this. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, the one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. That is why he said, not all of you are clean. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done to you. Now, there are a couple of things worth noting here. One, Jesus does the job of the lowest slave. Can you imagine that scene? You're sitting at the table, reclining. Your conversation is breaking out, supper has begun, and suddenly Jesus stands up. Now, there didn't seem to be any significance to that for a moment, but then he walks over to the water basin that the servants used to wash feet. Now, we don't know if the servants had already washed their feet or not, or if there were servants furnished for the moment to wash feet. Perhaps because of the nature of the private party, no one had had their feet washed. But Jesus takes off his outer garment, wraps a towel around himself, takes a bottle and pours water into that basin, picks it up and brings it over and sits it down right in front of his disciples. He grabbed Peter's feet and sets to wash them. This is a shameful thing. You know, it's funny. Peter is humble enough, as they say, to not want Christ to wash his feet, but not humble enough to know not to correct his own Lord and God. Isn't that the way we are? God does something unexpected. We are humble in a certain area of life, but we want to tell him what to do in another because we think we know better. Peter's answer to him is, you going to wash my feet? I don't think so. Jesus' answer, you don't understand now. Wasn't that normal for the disciples? But you will understand what I'm doing later. Peter tries to deny him. And Jesus says, if I don't wash you, you have no part with me. There's more here than just servant leadership. There's a couple of principles at play. One is the servant leader. If you want to be a leader in the Christian world, you need to serve like the lowest of servants. The next thing is that Christ's relationship with Peter hinged on forgiveness. Think of the symbolism of this. When you walk through life, you walk through dirty streets. Your feet become fouled with muck, with mire, with dust, sometimes with manure. And then when you get to your destination, you're filthy. But not your head, not your hands, not your body. As a Christian, if you've trusted in Christ, you've already been washed. Jesus said to Peter, you've already been washed. All I need to do is wash your feet. Peter's little, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head, is just kind of that response to, well, I want to part with you. I don't want to be separated from you. I want you to have relationship here. And Jesus says, I've already washed you. I already have relationship with you. But you need your feet washed. We walk through a dirty world. Have your feet been washed lately? Do you trust in Christ? Secondly, have you been bathed? Those who are in that dirty world who have never trusted Christ don't just need a foot washing, they need the whole thing. But you only need the whole thing once, and then you're clean. And these guys were clean for the rest of the day, right? They were clean as they entered this place, but their feet were dirty. The other thing is that this is not only servant leadership, it is not only that daily forgiveness for our sin, that we have been forgiven once and for all if we trust in Christ, but we need to confess our sin and to trust Him so that our relationship with Him continues to grow and flower. But there's also this last part of the setting, that not only should we serve one another, but we need to forgive one another as Christ forgives us. When we approach another person, we need to do it humbly and gently. As I believe it was Harry Ironside used to say, when we wash one another's feet, we need to be careful of the temperature of the water. We don't stick another person's feet in scalding water or in ice water. We serve them, and we wash their feet gently when they fail. And when we fail, we need to be open to having our feet washed, as it were, to being forgiven. So I'm going to leave you with this. Have your feet been washed lately? What of the world are you carrying around with you that you don't need, that all you need to do is humble yourself before the Lord and allow Him to wash you? Is there somebody else that you owe an apology to for the things of this world, that you need to allow them to wash your feet? Or is there someone whose feet you need to wash, and to do so humbly because of their sin in their life, because they need correction or they need help or they just need forgiveness from you? Don't be like those who say that they forgive, but then keep a record in their mind. Wash one another's feet. You want to be a leader? Wash one another's feet. And with that, we continue moving towards Christ's ultimate moment of sacrifice. We know that Judas has in his mind to betray Him, and we will see that come to fruition as we walk towards the cross. Thank you much. Have a wonderful day.